Secretary, and now, of course, as Foreign Minister, you have helped drive a remarkable strengthening of the bilateral relationship with greater collaboration across a wider range of issues than we have ever had before. So what is it about Australia that means India has been keen to deepen that cooperation across multiple issues from the diplomatic to the defence areas?
Well, first of all, Justin, thank you for not starting with cricket. It would have been a little painful, but so let's talk about something a little more positive as the first question, which is Australia. Till the cricket happens, then we'll have a different conversation. Look, some time ago, I started actually reflecting on why the Quad has worked the way it has. And my thesis, which is part of a book, was, yes, there's the obvious explanations, changing geopolitics, global goods deficit, etc. But an important part of the explanation is actually that India's different bilateral relationships with Quad members have grown very substantially in this period. Now, the other three Quad members have a different history and a different, closer relationship. And the change, in a way, I would say from 2007, when Quad was first attempted, to 2017, when the Quad was more successfully done the second time, is actually the change in the bilaterals. And I would say probably the bilateral which has changed the most is Australia. One metric of how a relationship is really is, okay, so how often did the PMs meet? And I think we had, about a 30-year spell where our PMs never actually formally sat down. Compare that to today when we have agreed on the practice of an annual summit. I look, at my own predecessors. I mean, this is my 5th visit to Australia in the last 3 years. I suspect if I looked at the last 5 visits of foreign ministers, probably take many, probably double-digit years. And if you go beyond that, you look at the quality of our defense cooperation today, the fact that we've been able to do the first phase of a free trade agreement, the fact that Australian universities were the first universities to come and say, okay, we are prepared to explore a new Indian policy regarding foreign educational presence. I look at the Indian diaspora numbers. So I look at the trade volume, which is, I think, $48 billion right now. It was a relationship whose potential to me was waiting to be realized. It needed an effort on, somebody had to bell the cats. And it so happened in 2014 that there was a juxtaposition of circumstances that happened. And I must say this to the credit of everybody thereafter. People have built on it layer by layer. When I see, every conversation I have, we actually come up with something new to do. Even on this visit, and I'm not yet done with my conversations in this town. I was in Brisbane 2 days ago, and I visited the HADR warehouse that DFAT runs. It was a warehouse which helped us deliver relief material to Papua New Guinea. And when I look at it, this is a platform which would be very helpful to us. We could think of, in fact, how it could be helpful to Quad as well. So the more we do, the more possibilities open up. I think somewhere we needed to, there were some preconceptions on either side. Let's be honest about it. That we had some image of you, and you probably had the same of us, which somewhere held us back. I think once we have overcome it, we are today, really the relationship is on a roll.
On a roll it is. I think the bilateral relationship, which has gone from strength to strength, then goes into the minilaterals. You mentioned the Quad. So let me ask you something you have canvassed before. You've been asked about previously that India's simultaneous active engagement of groups like the Quad, along with groupings like BRICS, which are seemingly contradictory groupings. Your response has consistently been that India is able to walk and chew gum at the same time. And of course, the ability to understand all nations and work with all parties is vital. Australia has missions all over the world, including places like Moscow and Tehran, of course. So my impression, Minister, has been that India sees value in being in all these groupings, but doesn't always necessarily see them as equal. How do you, as Foreign Minister, and how does India navigate these different relationships to still ensure that countries around the world see India as a large nation that prioritises the protection of international rules?
Again, history, political culture, to some extent, kind of a security ethos, all these feed into decisions you make. In the case of Australia, you have a long, a very old treaty relationship with the United States. Which is your primary security, it's the anchor relationship in a way. That's not been our history. Our history has been really to kind of maximize space and options and gain more maneuvering ground and try and do more things, autonomously. So that's where we are coming from. Now, given that, it's natural today when actually the world is much more fragmented, when in one sense clearly much more multipolar, much more complicated, that it's not easy to say today, okay, these countries are on that side and those countries are on that side. There's a lot of cross holdings in a way. Given all that, we do think that the ability to, in fact, not just the ability, the strategy to have, a presence in different groupings and develop working combinations with different countries, because each one of them has a logic of its own, and I would not set one against the other. To us, we really honestly, and I'm not being clever here in my argument, we honestly don't think being members of BRICS excludes you from being members of Quad, because to us they serve very different purposes. Quad has a certain Indo-Pacific context. Again, the manner in which it grew, the building blocks of Quad were very different. In the case of BRICS, it was really a coming together of some large countries whose common feature in many ways was that they were non-Western. So by joining Quad, now I don't become Western. I still remain non-Western. I'm not anti-Western, but I'm not Western. So I think, in fact, in many ways, I would argue that this multiplicity of memberships and being able to navigate them are natural. I would even go a step further and say, actually, there's a service we can do by this. At a time when the world is very polarized and countries often don't communicate with each other. I look at the world today, and let's take the two big conflicts which are underway, Ukraine and the Middle East. There are not too many countries and too many leaders who can go to Moscow and go to Kiev and go to Tehran and go to Tel Aviv.
No, there aren't. That's for sure. And I think that the world does look to you, look to India in many ways to play a balancing role in many of these areas, and perhaps from Australia's perspective to keep an eye on some other countries as well. Can I raise the recent BRICS and some of the language in the Kazan Declaration that interests me, and I think it interests many people in Australia and the region, that goes to show, I suppose, how challenging, you talk about it being fragmented and complicated, the world, how challenging it is to manage all these groups. The language in the declaration indicated that the sanctions, for example, against Russia for its invasion of Ukraine were unlawful, coercive measures. And it also described Israel's pager operation against Hezbollah as a premeditated terrorist act. So is that part of the navigation that India needs to go through to make sure that it is part of these groups and can play the important role that the large nation India is, or is it becoming more difficult when perhaps, I suppose in my view, some of those BRICS countries are imposing on others in a way that maybe the Quad democratic countries aren't imposing in their field?
Well, negotiations are negotiations. Whether it's once you're inside a room, everybody tries to get their point of view reflected to the best. So it's not like one particular group has very heated negotiations and the other ones giving all members a free pass. It doesn't happen that way. What really, the reality of my job is in each of these groupings and any other grouping you go to, you enter the room with some key objectives. Others do the same. Often they could differ, sometimes in nuance or emphasis, sometimes much more fundamentally. And then you try at the end of an outcome document to get the best you can. So I don't, if you look at any gathering and you ask a country, saying, did you get, is this the perfect document? Did it reflect everything which is your national position? I think anybody truthful will say, no, it did not. Because every gathering, every outcome document is some kind of compromise to some degree. So often, therefore, when you present me with this kind of situation, I would say, well, that was our position in the BRICS. That does not mean it would necessarily be our position somewhere else. I mean, life is a degree of maneuverability and adaptation and some give and take and some wheeling and dealing.
Yeah, no, makes sense. So standing by principles but adapting to the particular audience, that makes sense. You refer, Minister, to the importance of negotiations. I think a lot of countries, including Australia, look to your relationship with China, and the negotiations across a range of issues that India has dealt with. And of course, recently the two countries announced a way forward on issues concerning the disputed border area. That does seem to validate the idea of negotiation and give and take, and that diplomacy remains vital in resolving these disputes. We, of course, have been there before when it comes to China and making agreements and then breaking agreements. So I'm keen to hear your thoughts on where you see the India-China relationship, having now made that seeming breakthrough. Where do you see that relationship going in the next few years, given that it's not just important for India and China, but the relationship is really vital for the region itself?
Sure. Justin, let me split that into three parts. What did we just negotiate? What still lies ahead of us? And in a sense, what's our medium, long-term view of the particular relationship? What we negotiated just now on October 21st was the last set of what we call disengagement agreements, which essentially means that after the summer of 2020, Chinese and Indian troops have been deployed, have been forward deployed, you can say, along the line of actual control in distances which were extremely concerning. And the priority has been to find ways of separating the troops, which is why the word disengagement, having them go back to their normal operating basis as far as possible, and also resuming patrol in the way in which it used to be done in 2020. Now, this lot of the last agreement, you can say, primarily related to two areas which had to do with patrolling, where there were obstructions to the patrolling, and those obstructions were resolved. And the expectation is that patrolling there would resume. In fact, it is happening as we speak. It will take a little while because so we did the initial verification patrolling, then the actual patrolling takes place after that. Now, that's the part which we have got done. So you can say, in a way, the disengagement chapter is done. Its implementation will happen in the coming days to everybody's satisfaction. And the part which now awaits us, the immediate part which awaits us, is what we call the de-escalation, which is the build-up of forces along the line of actual control, because both of us, in our case, it was a counter-deployment, in their case, was the initial deployment. We have many more forces with much greater weaponry than existed along the line or proximate to the line before 2020. So we have negotiations ahead of us. During this period, our relationship was also very profoundly affected, because it has always been an assumption on our side that peace and tranquility in the border areas is a prerequisite for the development of our ties. And since peace and tranquility was disturbed, including one major incident of bloodshed, our relationship with China has cut back in different ways. So we also have to look at it. Now, everything is not going to happen at once. I mean, there will obviously be discussions of various kinds. But at the meeting, with the formal bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi, which was actually happening after 5 years, what was agreed was that the Foreign Minister and the National Security Advisor, we would meet our counterpart, and so would the relevant officials, and find ways by which we will have to discuss, how do we normalize the relationship, and what would be the extent and the pace and the manner in which we would do that. The third part is, okay, but how do we actually see that relationship? It's really, in a way, quite a challenge, because you have the two most populous countries in the world, both of whom have been rising. They are rising in a broadly parallel time frame, physically next to each other, in a manner in which I would argue there are very few historical examples. And how do you establish an equilibrium between yourselves in the border areas, which happens to be disputed as well as establish a working relationship on other issues, regional issues, multilateral issues. How do your new expressions of influence and activities impact on the relationship? Where do they, in a way, come into contact with each other? I think these are really a very complex set of issues, and do require a lot of thinking and management.
I think a lot of the regional countries can learn from what you're doing, and you mentioned equilibrium. It's definitely a word that Australia's Foreign Minister uses a lot as well. I'm keen to give the audience out here a chance to ask you a couple of questions as well. I think we've got some roving mics. If you see the roving mics and want to gesture towards them, please do so. There's a hand over here.
Thank you so much, Minister. My name is Lan Anh, come from Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. I have 2 questions for you. The first question is that I know that you are the author of the book Indian Way. So I just would like to explore, in your opinion, what is the Indian way, or what is the Indian strategic priority in the face of more and more stronger and stronger collaboration between China and Russia? That is my first question. And if I may, I do have the second questions. My second question is that, in your opinion, how China, how India and the global South will do in the high-tech and the critical tech competitions between the US and China and between the other power, in which way that they can reduce the over-dependence and increase autonomies? Thank you.
Well, actually you had 3, because you had India Way, you had Russia, China, you had ISET. Look, the reason I wrote the first book was I just ended 41 years in the Foreign Service. I felt I'd learned something in that period, and felt this great urge to express that something in prose. Part of it was also a few things which provoked me. There's this big debate, exactly, is there an Indian strategic school of thinking? Our own internal debate in India saying how much are we learning from our own history, our tradition, our experiences. So the idea was to draw on our analogies, on our history, on our epics, and create a kind of a framework which would then be popularized into others sort of thinking along similar lines. So that frankly was the endeavor. The Russia-China issue, look, if one looks at the continental landmass, please do not take it in any other way than I mean it. There are three big countries, north to south, Russia, China, India. There are other countries, some of them big as well, but these are the 3 largest countries. Now, it's been almost, I would say, a kind of a strategy 101 for us, that if there are 3 big players who are proximate to each other, it's in our interest to make sure that, remembering the basic geometry we learnt in elementary school, the 2 sides of a triangle will be bigger than the third. Never allow 2 sides to come to a point where the third is utterly disadvantaged. So this is not something which has happened now. It's been really for us almost like one of the first principles of our foreign policy or our national strategy in a way. And it remains a concern. And I would even argue, going beyond that, at a time when Russia's options, Russia's relationship with the West is very badly damaged, and Russia is turning more and more towards Asia. It's useful in Asia that we give Russia more options. So that would be an advice I offer to Vietnam as well. So I think the more sort of broadly Russia is engaged by Asian countries, frankly, that will allow that much more diplomatic, political flexibility for everybody concerned. This is not to say that it's not directed against any particular country. I think this is the way the world should be run. In our view, everybody should get more space, more options, more solutions, and it makes for a more, let us say, a more exciting life, and that's what we all want. Your third question on ISET, there are issues where sometimes being close to the middle and focusing on expanding your space is a primary objective. There are issues on which doing collaborations are your primary objective. At that stage, this is not one of those issues you look for balancing so much. You actually look for practical outcomes. You look at a choice of partners and say which choice of partners is likely to be more advantageous to me. Certainly from an Indian perspective, I would say for us, by and large, the Western world, specifically the Quad, even more specifically the United States, is a very crucial ISET partner, and that's really the direction you should be looking at where we are concerned.
Thank you. I think because that was 3 questions, we might have chance for maybe one more before moving on to our Minister Bowen's session.
With the Indian community being the quickest growing community in Australia, with such a large diaspora, as Foreign Minister, what would you suggest that the Australian community can do to encourage the diaspora here, but also the relationship with India?
Discuss more cricket. No, look, seriously, if I look at the big diaspora societies, and again, there are different kinds here. Some are more temporary, some are very narrowly work focused, some are with families, some are without families. But the kind of diaspora I see growing in Australia, I honestly think that it holds the key to the future of our ties. It's not the only key, but it's a very important key, because the model, in a way, the unconscious model which is shaping my thoughts is really the manner in which our relationship with the US transformed. I don't think it's a coincidence that the change in India-US relations can be almost completely correlated with the growth of the diaspora in the United States. So there's an obvious lesson there. What can the Australian society do in a way? Well, it can obviously, I think, make the best use of the diaspora, make them more comfortable, encourage them to maintain their identity and to serve as a living bridge. And I would say, if the, look, where India is concerned, the diaspora is usually very comfortable with the home country. And some of it is in the nature of the diaspora. People leave for non-political reasons. They tend to be family-centric. They tend to maintain family bonds back home. So there's a lot of travel and contacts, in a way, between the diaspora and the country of origin. So I would say the more the diaspora is made comfortable, the more they are seen as equal partners in Australia, the more they are likely to serve actually as almost as the ballast of the growing relationship.
Thank you. You have been very kind with your time. I haven't left enough time for questions, but the good news is you are back with us tomorrow with a session with your counterparts, Ministers Wong and Peters. So there will be more opportunities. But I can't let you go without saying that obviously the dialogue is happening in the middle of the US election, or the US election is happening in the middle of dialogue. Who do you think is going to win?
The future President of the United States.
Good. And you'll work with whoever that may be.
Right.
Great. Well, Minister Jaishankar, thank you for opening the Raisina Dialogue in dialogue. We're willing to canvass a whole range of issues, and I hope the rest of your trip is a successful one. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Justin.
Cashback, coupons, discounts, low rates only on